yourself.
Okay, I did it.
All right. Okay. Are you ready?
Yes. Okay, so welcome to the First Friday e-call. Today, the purpose of our e-call is to increase the local community's knowledge about the experts, the education, and the economic resources that are available to the small businesses and local entrepreneurs. And our speaker today is Becky McCray with Small Business Survival, and she'll talk to us about innovative business models. Becky is in big demand as a speaker for national and international conferences, and her advice is based on her real-world experiences as a small-town store owner, cattle rancher. Becky says, I don't just talk about rural issues, I live them. So Becky, take it away.
Thank you very much, Nancy. I'm really glad to be back. I know we did one of these before, and so it's exciting and fun to have the chance to come back and do a second one. And today we are going to talk about the innovative rural business models, because there are a lot of things that we're doing different in small towns than the way that we did business in small towns before. See, you're tempted to think about kind of the traditional way of going into business, which was that you had to buy a building downtown or you had to move into something at the industrial park. Those were kind of the ways that we looked at small business in small towns. But people are doing lots of different things now. So instead of starting with the whole huge process of going into business that might involve buying a building or rehabbing a building or bringing something up to code and doing all of the things that might be involved in that, as well as just figuring out your business plan, what's your angle, where are you going to buy your supplies, or who are going to be your suppliers, how are you going to convince them to work with you since you're based in a small town and are probably not their favorite market. And then we got to get the building ready. We need to find workforce for our small business, which in a small town can be a challenge, finding folks that are really great and actually available when you need them. And then we need to get some financing. So this is all before you even start and find out if your idea is actually any good. So that is a huge challenge. And so jumping into business with that set of challenges, it looks like not a small step, but like the huge step to going into business. Now, the way that the innovative rural business models present to us is that we could imagine that we could actually have some small steps in between. Instead of having to start with a big traditional business, maybe we could just come up with a few products and just sort of, maybe we can test them at a festival or an event. So like we could have a one card table business instead of jumping up to that $1.5 million worth of renovation to a downtown building. Maybe we could run a temporary business for just a month or two, borrowing somebody's empty building or renting a building just temporarily. Maybe we could go business inside a business and borrow somebody else's overhead that way. So there's all kinds of opportunities to do things in a different way, a little non-traditional. And we're seeing a lot of small businesses in small towns do this. And the more we look back in history, the more I see small town businesses have been doing some of these things for years, but it hasn't made it into the kind of the traditional, how do I plan for my business information that we hand to small businesses and things we tell people that want to go into business. So we're going to talk about ways that we can help people get into business in a smaller way that helps them get started, but is not the thing that we traditionally cover with businesses. Now, this springs from the idea-friendly method that I developed to help give us a framework that we can use when either applying it to business in this case, or applying it even to how we do our community. When we want to make our community more open to new ideas, there are 3 parts to it, and they are to gather your crowd, build connections, and take small steps. And those are the things that we have to do to make our community more open to new ideas. So if we apply take small steps to go into business, then what we get are the innovative rural business models. Now, I do want to say that the chat box is open, and I'm perfectly happy to take your questions by the chat, and we'll be able to answer those as we go live. And that Nancy has already asked, and we will have a copy of the slides for you. I'm going to kind of clean it up because I actually have a lot more information there than we actually have time to cover. So we're going to cover about 30 minutes here, and then we'll be able to stop at any point and take your questions, or I'll save questions for the end, but feel free to put them in the chat box throughout. Or if you have a story or example that you'd like to share, that's fine with me as well, because that helps everybody to learn from what you've seen in your area. So let's look at the innovative rural business models. There's 4 pieces to it, and they are tiny, temporary, together, and traveling businesses. So these are the 4 different characteristics, and we'll actually put these together in different ways, and it's kind of like a puzzle in that we take the different pieces and we stick them together in different ways so that we can generate more and more business models, and that gives us a lot of flexibility to go into business in a small town in a way that doesn't put all of our finances at risk. So the first real world example is business inside a business. Now, the old way says, you know, 1 business per storefront. Well, the new way, the innovative way that we do this in small towns is we're going to do lots of businesses inside a single storefront. So the picture that you see here is from Webster City, Iowa. And we're inside a sandwich shop there. And the person in black has just turned around from the counter, and she's turned around, she's placed her order, and now she's waiting for her sandwich. And you can see that in front of her then is a huge opportunity to have some tiny shopping. So there's this tiny little business packed inside this other business. So the wall says favorite things, and in front of it you see a whole bunch of home decor stuff, kind of cutesy, sort of farmhousey little decor. It's a tiny store inside of this other business. And then that rack that she's looking at, that's a book rack from a local author. So there's another tiny business packed inside there as well. And as it turns out, the owner of this sandwich shop is a photographer. And so some of his photos are on the wall and for sale on some of the empty wall space. And as soon as he put his photos up for sale, other people came to him and said, I have photos that I would like to put up for sale. So now they've got even more businesses packed into a single storefront. And I'm sure you can think of some examples that you've seen in communities you've worked with where more than one business is packed into the same location. So if you have a really cool or unusual example, feel free to put that in the chat box. In Homewood, Illinois, there was an Argentinian restaurant that popped up inside of a global furniture place, which I thought, Argentinian empanadas and global furniture. It just makes perfect sense. It makes you want to go buy furniture and eat empanadas. So there's all kinds of examples of this. And so I'd love to hear your examples as well. Now, it doesn't have to be full-time. This could be not just tiny and together, but it could also be temporary. And so the photo you see here is actually from my hometown. This is Alva, Oklahoma, and this is the furniture and home decor place. But inside, it's ladies' night out shopping night. So this is one of those nights when they try to get everybody to come downtown and shop. And you can see that what's happened is a couple of home-based businesses are actually inside of the furniture store just for tonight. So they were only there for the few hours during the shopping event. So at the table in the foreground there, you can see got all the jewelry spread out. So the jewelry seller's got all her jewelry available. And then in the background, what you see is standing up at the standing bar is a skincare consultant. And she's doing a skincare consult right there in the furniture store during ladies' night out. And you can see already exactly how this brings more people into the building. So you've got more people visiting the main business, but then all of the little businesses benefit as well. And you know that the jewelry seller and the skincare consultant also told all their favorite customers, come down and see me. I'm going to be at the furniture place. And so that brought more customers to everybody. And then it was also, they got exposure to new customers because it was during the special event. So that was tiny and temporary and together. So you can see how we're kind of putting the pieces together in unusual ways. And it doesn't have to just be retail. Remember that the first example we had was a sandwich shop, but it can be any kind of business. Actually, in Goffstown, New Hampshire, or no, I'm skipping ahead by one. Let's start with this one. This one is actually a service business. I went in to pay my insurance bill and actually asked them a question. So I actually walked into their office. And as I walked in the front door, they're in this retail storefront. And as I walked through the storefront doors, I'm walking back till I reached the front desk. And I realized it was like 12 feet from the front door until you reached the reception desk for the insurance company. And I thought, we could pack like 3 more businesses in all this empty space up here. And so you can see in the picture there, the person's overwintering their plants there in their storefront window, which would be okay. I mean, that's not a terrible use, but imagine we could pack another business in there instead of just your plants for the winter. Now, Goffstown, I kind of teased you that Goffstown, New Hampshire has a program like this, and it's called Art on the Walls. And this is once a quarter, they go into various local businesses with local art, and they hang it on the walls in the local businesses, and it changes out. So, you know, each artist brings their best customers, friends, and family to see their art actually hanging in public. And then they get exposure also to the people that already come to that business. So it is connecting people across, as well as giving just regular people in town an excuse to go into businesses maybe they don't visit that often. Oh, they've put up the new local art. Let's go around and see what's posted this month. So that is another way that you can do this. I see we've got, Nancy's got an example from St. Mary's, Kansas. There's an art gallery in a financial services office. Perfect, perfect. Now, there's another example of this that I know at least the women in the audience have seen, which is, that is our beauty salons. Our beauty salons are packed full of tiny businesses. First of all, you know that the salon owner owns her own business. So she's a business owner, but everyone that's actually doing services there that rents a booth, they're renting a booth. They're an independent contractor and a business owner as well, but they never get counted in your business counts. They never get paid attention to as business owners, but yes, they really are. And then if there's someone doing massage in a side room, another independent contractor, another independent business owner, all in there together. And then if you've ever gone to the beauty salon, you know there's always stuff for sale on the counter. There's always other stuff for sale. This happens to be the salon where I get my hair cut. And you can see there's like some t-shirts, and there's always like scarves and jewelry and all kinds of local stuff, candles, who knows what. And I actually went in the other day, and this was almost a year ago now, and they had headbands on the counter. And I was like, so who's doing the headbands? It was a local high school senior who has started her own business. She has 1 square foot on a counter in a beauty salon. And that's a business. So it's the 1 square foot business. I'm telling you right now, this high school senior is not just a high school senior with a side craft project. She's a future entrepreneur. This is someone who is testing a market with a time-limited market study with real-world exposure to customers. That's your future entrepreneur. And at the very least, she is your future, you know, she might fill a booth at one of your events. She might be the kind of person that's going to help you do things because she's already learning about business, customer mindset, serving her customers, serving the market. This is the kind of thing you want to encourage, even though it's only 1 square foot of a business. You definitely want to encourage these kind of things. And oh wait, there's 2 actually. Hold on, I got behind by one here, didn't I? Yep. Okay. So Luke says, and antiques, Anteaqueus, antiques in Cortland. Antique shop also serves lunch Tuesday through Friday in the former grocery store, which is awesome because, you know, sometimes it's hard to fill those big old grocery store spaces. And we'll talk in just a minute about how you can fill some of those giant spaces with things that will help fill up that huge retail space. In Topeka, there's a flower shop, Nancy says, that is exhibiting jewelry and products and has a spare room for rent for home businesses who need a place to meet with customers. I'm seeing that a lot of times. They market themselves as a home business association. Great marketing as well. And I am seeing a lot more places that are providing a room to rent so you can run your home parties. Most of us don't want to bring it to our home now. We don't want to clean. We don't want to get things ready, but we can borrow a room from a business. And so there's one in Alva, Oklahoma that has their back patio is available for this kind of thing, which is really cool because it's downtown. They kind of bricked and dressed up the space that faces the alley. So it's really kind of fun and you want to go there. And I'm hearing about lots of places that are using that extra room to provide a space for people that want to run a home party, but not in my home. Okay, so let's talk about how we can fill some of those giant spaces. This one in particular is from Washington, Iowa. And this was a town of a population of about 7,000. So it's a pretty good sized town, but they had this huge 15,000 square foot former department store, which is a lot of space to fill. That's a lot of space to fill. And so it struggled. I mean, they just couldn't find a way to get the whole thing filled. And so a group of local people got together and said, what can we do with this? And so they divided it up. And here is a picture of what the interior looked like this Christmas. And it's just a collection of little shops. They call it the Village because they're like little village storefronts in there. And it's so cute. I'm telling you, there's always something new. And they actually have like a seating area where guys can kind of wait in comfort while their gals go and shop everything. And many of these businesses actually start even smaller than like just a few hundred square feet, which are what the little tiny storefronts run. You'll see there's a push cart right in the middle, looks like an old fashioned, like push it down the street push cart. That's actually a separate business. So you could start, even if you couldn't fill a store, you could fill just 3 shelves. You could be a business. And even smaller than that, they actually rent tables in that little courtyard space. So if you could just fill a table, you could be a business. And so I love it. This is really bringing down those barriers to entry that hold people back. The number of people who could rent that entire building, afford to rehab it themselves, and put one giant retail store in there, very small. And the number of retail stores that would work in that setting, really limited. Like we would have a hard time making that work. But the number of people who could fill just 3 shelves on a little push cart in your town, much larger. You have so many more people that could pull that off. And by doing that, you're spreading economic opportunity to more people. You've pulled down the barriers to entry, and you're making a lot more business activity happen in your community by giving them smaller spaces to work in. So this takes the tiny and together so that we get that critical mass because we've got lots of stuff going on. And it's also temporary. If you rent a push cart, you don't have to commit to being there for 5 years on a lease. You just have to rent it for this month. And that makes it so much easier for people to get in business, which is what we want. We want them to be able to try their ideas out. And in fact, one of my favorite things about it is I can't tell you how many towns I've heard who said, oh, if we could only like support a bookstore. But you can't figure out how to do that in 15,000 square feet. Look what they did at the Village. It's the one wall bookstore. That's so cool. It gives them an opportunity to have books and make that available. And it didn't take up a lot of space. And then you can see that other little side wall there just has some local art that is for sale as well. So then you've got your cute storefronts, the one wall bookstore, and one wall of local art, taking advantage of every square foot that they have in that little building. Actually, it's a very big building, but they're breaking it down into units that people can fill. Now, these are done in big cities as well. It's not just small towns that do these. And in fact, I've seen this trick done of breaking up a big building into small spaces, lots of places. This one is in Grand Rapids, Missouri, which is a big town of like 200,000 people, which is huge to me. But the great thing about it was they were profiled in the newspaper, and they said it was an experiment just to try to fill that vacant retail space because they had an economic downturn. Rose Ellis was one of the artists. She's the artist you see here. And I actually borrowed this photo off of her Facebook page because they said she had just one wall in the foyer. So just as you come in, she's in the entryway and she's got that one wall, and that's all she's got. And that in that little tiny bit of floor space, she's using that as her studio now. And you can see she's there and painting. They talked to her about it in that newspaper article, and she said, "You couldn't get me out of here with a crowbar. It is the best business plan I never thought of. It has turned my life around." Boy, that is exactly what we would like to do for a lot of small business owners in our small towns. We would like to turn their lives around with just one wall and an entryway. And that's what it makes possible when you allow people little tiny spaces to put their business in. Now, when you apply this divided building concept, not to retail, but to service businesses or to other kinds of business, you get co-working, which is everywhere now. We're hearing about all kinds of co-working. Anybody that can work from their laptop could work from a co-working space. And then if you apply that same concept to stuff that you make by hand, you get maker spaces. This particular one is in Sonora, California, population 5,000. They lost their hospital. And so they had a giant hospital building. They were trying to figure out what to do with it. And so they made a shared space that they called the Innovation Lab. And inside of it, they put an electronics lab and a video space so that you can go there and shoot video. There's actually a wood shop so that you can do prototyping as well, metalworking tools. So it's everything they could think of to make stuff. They have computer set up with video game programming software and other styles of programming software, because video game programming, one of the hottest areas of programming in California. A lot of people there can remote work with the big startups in the big cities further south in California, because the Sonora's up in the northern end of the state and doesn't have easy access to that kind of thing, which I think is really cool. You can apply the same concept not just to making stuff, but to making artistic things. And so what arts kind of shared maker spaces can you make? This particular one is in Sulphur, Oklahoma. It's called the Artesian Gallery because they have actually an artesian hotel across the street. So this one is art in capital letters. Is another one of those squished together words. Mark Mulligan, who's with the Chickasaw Nation that runs this project, said that to him, it was like shared co-working space for artists, collaborative. And that his intention was that it would be like the experience that he had when he was an artist in college, that he was constantly being exposed to other artists who did things in different media or did things in different ways. And so that exposure to other people actually expanded his thinking as an artist. And he'd like to have that experience for the native artists that are part of the Artesian Gallery there. And then there's actually have like a gallery space and a classroom space. They actually have a small supplies store. So it's a beautiful, beautiful facility that no one artist could have done themselves, but by coming together, they were able to take that shared building concept and make something really awesome out of it. Okay, so now we're done with the big buildings. We've talked about how to take a giant building and divide it up. We're taking existing business and pack more in there. Now we're gonna go really small. We're gonna talk about tiny businesses. I love tiny businesses. And so this is actually Nacho Business in Aberdeen, South Dakota, a real business. I don't name them, people. I just tell you what they've named them. So it's Nacho Business. They have really good nachos too. And that guy's a marketing genius, but it's just a shed in a parking lot and it's a going concern. It's been there over a year now. And the idea that somebody could make a nacho restaurant out of a full-size downtown restaurant is not going to happen, but he can fill a shed. Now, that's kind of the lowbrow example, is nachos in a parking lot, but it can be much more upscale and much more well-dressed than the nachos in a parking lot. This is in Hyannisport, Massachusetts. And so this is much more up end. These are called artist shanties. So even though they're called shanties, they're actually these really cool sheds or shanties that are just like 10 by 10 or 12 by 15, I think is their largest one. And so painters and photographers and all kinds of local artists and jewelers display their stuff. They're only open in the summer when they know they'll have tourism traffic and the weather will be nice enough for it to work. It has become a thing. Oh, the shanties are opening up. It's finally summer. And so people get excited about it. This has worked so well. It's a competitive program. You have to apply. You've got to be good enough to be in their shanties. So this is definitely not, if you were thinking maybe shanties or sheds would be like low end, it can definitely be high end. Now, another example that maybe not the dressiest example, this is kind of a low end example. This is an answer though to when you are thinking, well, people are going to oppose the idea of using sheds. They won't like it. This is a nonprofit. This is the Friends of the Library in Cleveland, Oklahoma, little town. And that little shed and the little shed next to it, they sit next to the parking lot, next to the library, and they sell used books that get donated to them. And they use that, here's a picture of the little inside, they use all the money that they raise to support the library projects for kids. Now, let's just think about this for a minute. If you think the city council is going to oppose using sheds, what council member is brave enough to say, I'm against having children's story time? Like, that's a brave local council member who will oppose that plan. So sometimes using a nonprofit as your starting point can be a way of getting started on something like having sheds that you can use businesses in. Now, let's look at another example. This one's in Tynesta, Pennsylvania. This is a town of 500 people. This is a small town. And the lot that you see there, that big empty lot, that was a downtown storefront block that covered that whole corner. that burned down. So they lost this building in their downtown. And in a town of 500, one giant corner storefront like that, that was a big percentage of their downtown to lose to a fire. They spent 10 years, their Economic Development and Industrial Development Authority spent 10 years trying to get a developer to come and build a building on that lot. And every builder laughed them out of the room and said, you know, you're 500 people, like, we're not coming there to build a building. So they could have just kind of admitted defeat at this point, but somebody got the crazy idea, we're going to put storage sheds on that lot. Now, you know that somebody at the meeting where they said, we're going to bulldoze it, we're going to put storage sheds on it and put businesses in them. Somebody at that meeting, there was a guy in the back of the room, and I'm going to pick on the guy in the back of the room there, Nancy, that's with you. There was some guy in the back of the room like this going, he was like with the arms crossed, like, you know, that guy at the councilman who was going to go, those are going to look like crap. Like you can just picture this happening at the meeting because you know that somebody did, but look at what they put up. They're so cute. These are awesome. So they've taken just little storage or garden sheds that you can buy. You know, they come in all sizes now, even like 2-story ones. They've put little false fronts on them. They invested a total of $40,000 in the entire project, and they actually got a USDA grant to come up with that money. And I don't know about your Economic Development Authority, but I have seen plenty of Economic Development Authorities drop $40,000 on a far less useful project. These things have been rented since day one. The day they announced that they were open, they've had a waiting list ever since. It takes about $50 a month to rent one of these. You do have to put up $500 up front to make your utility deposit so that you can get started. There's Amish jams and jellies. There's a t-shirt seller, an ice cream seller. There's a cute home and garden decor store. There's all kinds of cool stuff in there. One of my favorite stories is the local winery that couldn't afford to do their own storefront downtown, but because they're located out in the country, because they're a winery, like that's where the grapes grow. So they needed a place that they could sell in town, but they couldn't afford to do their own storefront. So what they did instead is rented one of these little jewels. And so now the winery, instead of being only out of town, is actually located in town as well. And that gives them more exposure to the town market, as well as letting more people find out about where they are and making a convenient location. So this really shows you the power of having that critical mass. The fact that there are, I think there's 10 or 12 of the little things. And so, you know, with 10 or 12 little businesses, that's enough reason for somebody to stop. And they actually put in some little park benches and some picnic tables and some shelter, and they put it in Wi-Fi. See how smart they are? So that people would want to come and linger. And that gives people a great place to kind of gather and hang out. They can shop these little businesses. Right across the street from this is the rest of downtown, where there's a coffee shop and an arts gallery. And that has provided a good reason for those local businesses across the street to do two things that I think are so awesome and that are so hard to get businesses to do. They extended their hours because this thing is open late. And so they got the coffee shop and the art gallery to be open longer hours. That's a big win for a town of 500 people. And the second thing, this is such a huge rebuttal to the question of, will they look like crap? These things are so cute, and these little storefronts that they've put on them are so nice that the building owners across the street started making facade improvements because they needed to look at least as good as the little storage sheds. And our Colette says, are these seasonal? Heating and cooling and utilities? These are seasonal. And so in Pennsylvania, they're in the mountains in Pennsylvania, they get a real winter. And so they close up over winter. And they, in fact, they were going to close early in the fall when they thought the visitor season would end, and the vendors lobbied them. Can we be open later in the year? Because we know we'll have some fall things that we want to stay open for. So they actually had to extend how long they were open during the year. The utility they provide is electric, and they do have, I'm trying to remember, they have a bathroom available somewhere. I can't remember if it's porta potties or if there's an actual bathroom facility, because they're near the farmer's market. Just if you see the little garden shop at the back and it looks like there's a church behind it, between those two things is the farmer's market. And so that's also another bonus that they're connecting up with that existing. Nancy says, do they do any co-staffing? Now, this particular example, I'm not aware that they do any co-staffing here. I think that each individual owner opens their own individual shop. Although I would not put it past them to, like, the t-shirt shop and the ice cream store probably share or something like that. The example we did before of the village, you remember where we had the little village of shops inside the big building all together? They do co-staff. And so when you sign your lease for your little space, whatever little space you sign, you pay so many dollars in rent and so many hours working the register. So there's one register for that whole store. So that's on that antique mall model. And we've seen plenty of antiques malls where they have one register and then they just divide up everybody's sales. And in fact, if you go look for those example business plans and all the rules that go with dealing with antiques malls, you can apply those same rules to something like that big divided space. Okay. And this is officially the end of time. Like I said, I would take 30 minutes. We've got our 30 minutes. So more questions or examples. I will rush through just a few more things here right quick. This is the neighbors to the little town Tynesta with their storage shed. Their neighbors in Connellville have decided they're going to do this. And they started with 3. They couldn't swing doing the whole project at once. So I love it. They've applied Take Small Steps to their Take Small Steps project. So they've started with just 3 sheds. They promptly rented out. They have a goal of building up to maybe 7 or 9 in their downtown, which I think is awesome. Another town that took this same idea is Miller, South Dakota. And they actually have a group of high school students who had that standard complaint of, like, there's nothing to do here in Miller, which is a town of like 1,500 people. And so when they heard this story at Rural X, when we presented it, then they decided they would do it in their town. So there's this Christmas celebration and they're like, which is great. It's all for adults. Like, we want to do something that'll be more fun for us. And so they took the idea of businesses and sheds and they went to the guy who sells sheds. They didn't buy sheds. They just said, hey, can we use the sheds you already have? So over Christmas, here's what they put together. So there's like a little baked goods store. There was a local themed vintage t-shirts and license plates that the kids themselves sold. There was Asian fusion cuisine, which I think is the most ambitious thing I've ever heard sold out of a storage shed in my life. That just tops nachos like all the heck. And so this is the kind of thing. They did learn it was very cold that day. The last business was the photo booth, which, you know what? That didn't take much to make a business. You need a digital camera, a photo printer, and some stuff. And you've got a business just for the holidays. So they had a great time with all of that. Lots of fun. It was super cold. And so they decided, you know what, that was too cold. Even though they're from South Dakota, they know they all have heavy coats. I think they were fine. You can see the smart guy who sells sheds actually put in a fire ring with his business name on it. Smart guy, a little advertising there. You know, he benefited from all the people coming in and going, say, these storage sheds are nice. I'd never looked inside. So it was good for him as well. But because it was so cold, they decided, and this is what we do. We take small steps and we learn from what didn't go very well. And so they decided they would do it again in summer. So they put it in July, which I think was super smart. And they did it again. They did it this past July. And they're talking about whether they might do, I think they did do during the holidays again. And they're talking about they'll do it again in July because it doesn't take that much to add. And then it's a really cool addition and it's temporary. Like, even though you think it's a great idea, doesn't mean you have to do it permanently and like bulldoze a lot and put in 10 storage sheds. Go find the guy that sells sheds and talk him into it. The high school kids can do it. You can do it. So I know it can happen. A little more hard work would go into this version. This is the tiny house version. They did this in Pascagoula, Mississippi. Pascagoula, population about 22,000, so big town. But they had a big dirty lot down by the tracks that was empty. And then they got these tiny houses that had been temporary housing after Hurricane Katrina, and they put them up on the lot. And that is the picture that you saw at the beginning of the gals running the cupcake store. And then there's also a salon. There's a place that just makes hair bows. And I'm telling you, you couldn't run an entire storefront downtown with hair bows, but you can fill a tiny house. And these folks are so smart, they know that their pipeline of where they'll get new businesses is by having space for more businesses to happen. So they have to scale it down. And so they have frequently on their big open green space, you see all the tiny houses stretched out there in the big U shape. In that big green space, they run business fairs. And so people can get in there and they can try out their business idea, small scale. And in fact, if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, that one red tent, do you see what their business is? It's It's an ice chest and some pop, and it's a business because it's Mississippi. I'm telling you, it's hot. Look, the clouds are up overhead. I'm telling you, it's hot and humid that day. They sold the heck out of that pop. So it gives people a chance to actually get going with a much smaller scale version. Now, they're not going to sell pop as a big business, but they're learning how to handle a business, how to deal with the sales tax, how to deal, they get a chance to learn about how to deal with people. And then they get connected to other people that are there and selling. They get connected to the idea of the little anchor square, which is the name of the little tiny house business square. That's giving people an opportunity to gain skills, to build up some money, maybe build up some credit. You're making it possible for people to try out business ideas in a little tiny space. So where are we on time? We're still okay on time. A little more. Feel free, throw in any questions. I promise I'll make up answers as we go. So trucks and trailers is the last major category of businesses. And we've all seen trucks and trailers, and everybody loves the food trucks. I will say this particular picture, this is Altadena, California, which is not a huge town, but they're near the big city. So they were able to pull some California big city trucks to come up to their town. And I just want to point out to this, which is they said that the local restaurant said, how dare you do that? Like bring in food when we already sell food in town. So I can just hear your local restaurants saying this same complaint. I know I heard it from my own local grocery store owner. So after 3 times of doing this, 3 months, they found out, the restaurants came back to them and said, you can't quit doing it because it's our busiest night of the month. So just be prepared when people complain to you. Don't bring in food trucks because it'll hurt our restaurants. Point out Altadena, California. It's actually the busiest night of the month for the restaurants because it gets people excited about going out. Sometimes the food truck food, if you've ever eaten from the food truck, you get like the really small, cute serving, but then you're hungry and so you want to go eat real food. So you see how this thing works. And so that generates more business. You can also do service businesses. Leo's Sharpening Service, good Kansas business. They're based in South and Western Kansas. They're kind of my neighbors. And then this one is actually out of Cosmos, Minnesota. There's the laser tag. I promised you Cosmos, Minnesota, 300 people, not big enough to support laser tag on its own. But if you're in a trailer, you go to every little town and that's enough to support a business. Retail is huge. There's all kinds of retail stores that are now in trucks and trailers. We're gonna skip through pop-ups. Oh, I do want to talk about right here. This is what I want to start with. We'll just spend just a few minutes and talk about dealing with these empty lots in this, the roofless building where there used to be a building, but there's no building anymore. So these are all ideas that could go on an empty lot or things you could do with some place where you have like an empty space. This is one of my favorites. This one's in Hominy, Oklahoma. Look at that beautiful natural stone archway at the very back. It's gorgeous. We could do so much with this and it wouldn't take that much to clean it up. And you think I'm crazy, but I'm going to show you some pictures of cool stuff that people have done with roofless buildings. This is an empty lot in my town. That coffee trailer that you see in the back left back there, the coffee trailer's been there for long enough that they actually have like the little carport set up behind them. That's the anchor. And then in the summer last year, it just popped up and suddenly it was a little marketplace and there were people selling everything from tamales to lipstick to home preserves to a person brought like farm stuff from their farm and had a little tiny like addition to the farmer's market on this empty lot. I bought tamales. They were really good. This is the gal up front here sells those really good tamales. This is Porterdale, Georgia. Porterdale is a town of about 1,200 people. And they had a 12,000-foot giant community center gymnasium, awesome thing that was built in the 1930s, but it burned down. And it sat for a long time and they thought, we'll never be able to find enough money to restore the whole thing. And so what they've done is just stabilized the bricks of the structure. And so now they have a stage and they hold concerts and they had a wine tasting and they have a food festival and people get married in there because it's this cool rustic looking structure. So you know that empty building that we just saw in Hominy that's just the front? I mean, we could make something cool out of that. The Roxy Theater in Clarksdale, Mississippi, little tiny town on the Blues Trail in Mississippi. This historic theater, the back of the roof collapsed, and so they stabilized what was left because they couldn't afford to fix up the whole thing. And so now it's an open air venue because it's in Mississippi, so they can totally do that. Now, you think this won't work in Kansas, but you're wrong, because that one's in St. Francis. And Marcy Penner sent me this photo, and I love it. This one is a little coffee shop, and it's called Union Square, and it's just the brick front of what used to be a building and isn't anymore. And you can see it's open to the weather at the time. But they've put in 2 little tiny buildings to be their kitchen that's up to code, meets the requirements. And so that was an easier way to do it than to try to like rebuild the whole building. You know how much that would cost, but you can get a temporary building and stick in there and make do for now. And Marcy tells me they've actually, now that it's been more than a year, they've actually got a roof over their heads again. So they've got a roof over their heads. That's an improvement for the downtown. There's actually a coffee shop in St. Francis. That's 1,300 people. They're excited to have a coffee shop. Luke says, I was going to mention Fresh 7 has a roof now. See, there you go. They do have a roof now. All right. This one is in Paris. This is in Paris, Texas. Paris. It's in Paris, Texas. It's called 107, and it's a beer garden. So you can see as you look through the top floor windows there, there's no roof there. It's gone. But they've put little storefront back on it. So it's got windows and glass there in the bottom floor. So it looks nice as you see it. And this is the inside. This picture, Brett Holbert sent me that. And that's his beer garden. And they actually call it a wine and beer garden because they're very uptown in Paris. But it's so much better to have a roofless building that's now a beer garden with like that. You can see they've used the temporary building trick again. There's a temporary building in the back that is their kitchen and up to code and all of that, meets all the health department requirements. They even have bathrooms around the corner. They figured it all out, but we're still open to the sky. They even have ceiling fans because it's hot down there in Paris. So they're doing what they can to work with what's left of the space without having to just knock it down and give up on the whole thing. Now, this is another one. This is my sister. That's my sister, Connie Foote. She does a fitness class, but they don't do it indoors. Anytime the weather is even marginally good enough, what they do, you can see, is that they just hold class on like an empty lot or an available space. And she gave me permission to use that photo. But this photo where she's standing, you see that exercise equipment? That's actually in the park in Alva, Oklahoma. It's just a concrete slab with some exercise equipment like some weights and there's like actually a stationary bicycle that's bolted down. You could do that on any empty lot or empty space in your community and be meeting your health goals for your community to help people have more healthy activity. And maybe you'll find somebody that's going to teach a class down there. I've seen all kinds of classes done that way. This was a photography class that I was part of, and that's being held in one of those empty lots where there used to be a building, but now there's just a brick floor there, and that one's in Alva, Oklahoma. So that was the very super quick tour through the innovative rural business models. Tiny, temporary, together, and traveling. So you just put those 4 pieces together any way you like. That allows you to come up with all kinds of creative business models that work for small towns. And I have a little bonus for you if you go to saveyour.town. So that's actually the website address, like saveyour.town/Kansas. Then there's a little download you can get there. You can sign up for my newsletter, and as a bonus, you get this download, which is 101 ways to make more tiny businesses happen in your town. So you'll recognize some of these ideas and a whole bunch of other crazy ideas that we have seen or come up with, or things that we just made up because it seemed like it ought to work. And it's all together in that one download, the 101 ways to make more tiny businesses happen in your small town. And Nancy, I will be sure that you get the slides, and I'll go ahead and cut off all that extra stuff that we didn't do that comes after this on this slides, and we'll let you make those available, but it will be later today after we get those done.
Fantastic. Becky, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll give people the opportunity to, let's see, I see Cindy Evans asked, will I be able to share the download, 101 ways, and the newsletter?
Yes, you can. What I would prefer is, rather than take, because it's like several pages, I mean, 101 ways takes quite a few pages. Rather than put all of that into your newsletter, you might want to like just take a chunk of them and then include a link where people can come back to this page and get a copy for themselves. Because of course I'd love for them to sign up for my newsletter, because I'm a business owner too. But you're welcome to share it around, especially if you have a particular town you're working with and you want to share that with them. I think that would be great so that you can go, look, let's get started on making lots more tiny businesses happen.
Anybody that's on the Kansas Pride Facebook page knows that I liberally, every Wednesday I post, and they're almost always from the SaveYour.town resources that I've got. I am a Megatrends member of the monthly call. And
the megaphone,
yeah. Thank you.
Once a month we do a webinar, which is a little like this, only it's just the video and we almost never have slides, but sometimes we'll share photos. And the next one we'll do is rural jobs creation strategies. And we're always doing a local, rural, small town topic. We don't do big city topics. That's not our thing. We do small town stuff. So.
And it's really awesome. I recommend it. It's $20 a month, or if you're a megaphone member, it's $25 a month, which means that I'm not limited in the time frame that I can go back and look at those things.
And you can look at all the past ones. The members, if you buy just one webinar, you get that webinar. But if you're a member, you can see all of the past ones that we've ever done, which there's like 20 of them now that we've done so far. Yeah. And we're still going. We've got the whole plan for the year all figured out.
I noticed that this morning. That's pretty amazing. So Becky, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you all for joining us. We'll post these probably Monday to the Kansas K-State Research and Extension website. Becky, thanks so much for sharing with us.
Yes, thank you, Nancy. I'm really glad to have been back again.
Great. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody.